folks. I know we all want to network and everything like that. Good to be back. Thank you all. Now, we're going to be talking about the area of privacy and data, personal data as well. So I'd like to welcome Kumud Sharma, who is Head of Business Development for the Surf side of things, up to the stage. And Kumud will be presiding over this. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And yes, I hope you all are now rejuvenated with a cup of coffee, tea, and some biscuits, of course. Cookies, I'm sorry. So my name is Kumud Sharma. I'm the Head of Sales at Surf Solutions. And before I start discussing about this panel thing and the panelist, I'm sure many of you must be having this question. MEF, such a big corporate global event, and she's all decked up in this yellow, bright, shine shirt. Why so? Because we are the surfers. We are unusual. We are unusually intelligent. That is how we claim ourselves. You know, the products that we have, unique products. The name that we have is unique, Surf. We just surf, we just roam around, and we create something out of the box. So with the data privacy and security of the enterprise at the forefront, we have got two products in the market. One is the consent and preference management platform. And I must say, blockchain-based, unusual, centralized consent and preference management platform. And second is Authentica, the adaptive multi-factor authentication platform. But you know, the time limitation that we have on this panel discussion, I won't be able to boast much about the products and about us and about the surfers that we have. So without taking much of the time here, let's start the panel discussion. And I would like to first invite Mr. Prabhat Kumar, who is the CEO and the moderator for the panel discussion. So Mr. Prabhat Kumar is an industry leader and a tech entrepreneur with more than 2.5 decades of year experience. And he has been phenomenal, and he has a track record of converting the business ideas into successful businesses. He is a founding member and director of Esport Federation of India, and he is now coming up with his new initiative with the Surf. So ladies and gentlemen, please, a big round of applause to Mr. Prabhat Kumar.
Thank you, Kumud. Thank you. Before starting the panel discussion, I wanted to take back to you the last panel discussion. One of the panelists, I guess it was Shikha from Airtel, which talked about consumer interest should be safeguarded, right? Of course, it has to be safeguarded, and Government of India has heard you, and they are going to table the DPDP bill in July. That's what the news talks about. So there are two communication related to privacy. One is UCC, which has been regulated by TCCCPR guidelines of UCC 2018. And another is DPDP bill of 2019. Then again, they have tabled in 2022. And it is going to be passed in 2023 July. That's what our expectation is. But the problem here, which we need to see, what kind of impact enterprise is going to have. Are they going to invest a lot of money on infrastructure? Are they need to, there is a huge penalty on DPDP. It starts from 50 CR to 250 CR by breaching any of the regulation. Now, so this discussion, we are going to talk about how enterprise is going to take future ready to make sure that regulation is followed. But beyond, it is not about regulation. Can enterprise take the advantage to create trust? Trust in their consumers. So both the things are important, not only regulation, but also a trust. So before we start the panel discussion, I would like to run you through a small video which talks about all regulation worldwide, and then we'll call all the panelists for a discussion further. Can you run a video?
Consentica presents Consent Management Overview. In a globally connected world, data privacy and data security is a major concern for all stakeholders. UCC are communications made to subscribers without their knowledge or willingness via voice calls or SMS. Apart from being inconvenient, such communications also have an impact on people's privacy. Trust is the new KPI. Consent is equal to trust. Consent means any voluntary permission given by the customer to sender to receive commercial communication related to specific purpose, product or service. Legal framework that sets guidelines for the collection and processing of personal information are evolving globally. General Data Protection Regulation Compliance. As the world's most comprehensive data protection legislation, the GDPR requires organizations to operationalize and demonstrate compliance with many requirements and principles for personal data processing. The EU's GDPR paved the way for data privacy and protection laws around the world, and one of the latest is the emerging Personal Data Protection Bill in India. The Telecom Commercial Communications Customer Preference Regulations. To prevent customers from receiving unsolicited commercial communication, TRAI has revised the rules for telemarketers and enterprises for sharing bulk SMS voice call services in India. Presently, TCCCPR guidelines is governed using Distributed Ledger Technology DLT, and of its 4 phases, 3 have already been implemented. Of the 4th phase, digital consent and preferences yet to be implemented. While soon to be enforced Digital Personal Data Protection (DPDP) Bill 2022 is a legislation that frames out the rights and duties of the citizen on one hand and the obligations to use collected data lawfully of the data fiduciary on the other hand. Keeping this in mind, SURF has come up with India's first centralized consent management platform, Consentica, that helps enterprise to collect, document, and manage their consent securely. Consentica is backed by blockchain technology. It takes care of the complete consent and preference life cycle of the customer from opt-ins, opt-outs, and renewals. It also acts as a single pane of glass and the source of truth.
So now we would like to invite on stage our panelists. We'll start with Mr. Bhagwati Prasad Dubey, the Chief Information Security Officer at Axis Mutual Fund. Mr. Bhagwati has more than 15 years of experience and has worked with HDFC Life, Tata AIG, SBI Life and more before starting his tenure with Axis Mutual Fund. Welcome. Then we have Mr. Dilip Majhi, Head of Enterprise Data at HDFC Bank. Dilip is an innovator, game changer, and technical leader with 24 years of experience in data space. Mr. Pravash Dash, the founder and CEO at Arthan Finance. Pravash is a mentor, angel investor, and a seasoned retail banker with 18 years of experience. He has worked with Axis Bank, RBL Bank, and Yes Bank before founding Arthan Finance. We have Mr. Vikas Goel. Mr. Vikas Goel is a senior director at Gupshup. He is a business leader with rich experience in Indian and African region. Vikas is a risk taker and a change evangelist. And then we have Mr. Zafar Owais Andrabi, the founder and CEO at Al Muqeet Systems. Zafar is a serial entrepreneur with a focus on software and telecommunication space. Welcome, everyone. I'll just now hand over the discussion to Mr.
Thank you, panelists, for joining. So today's news talked about, the new DPDP bill is going to come, and they're going to be tabled in Parliament in July. So I have a question to all the panelists, whatever views you have. That is our organization in India, I'm not talking about only a large organization, even a large organization or a small organization are ready to follow this regulation or going to be implemented? Of course, government is going to give you 6 months time or 1 year time to implement this. But do you think they really need to invest, or in terms of infrastructure, in terms of policies, securities? What are your views on implementing this and getting the regulation implemented properly?
like as it's not new, like GDPR is going to put up in the parliament. It's like years. Last year also it was placed, so people already have a gist of what is going to happen, and in fact organizations are focused on it, and it's minimally everybody is prepared for it. So somebody has already invested in some of the things. Some are in a projected pipeline. So I hope everybody's somewhat a bit is ready to take care. And as we already have our EU, so some knowledge are also coming from their side. So I think more or less the big giants are already prepared. Might be it will be a new initiatives for smaller.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah. So let me give some statistics, what is happening behind the scenes. So in 1962, when Indian government, they declared that, we are going or implementing FI, the financial inclusion. It means allow the very common people to access the banks, 1962. We just got the, Then if you look at 2004, people got access into ATM without, going into the banks, right? Then 2014 or 16, right? Bhim, UPI and all, right? So that means the trend is showing we are extremely ramping from, time to time. Customers are getting, technology savvy, right? People are not reaching to the, branches. People are started getting into the different, channels to access and all. Now the problem is the more spin up, the more customer will get into the place. So your security threat, your way of dealing the system is extremely imposing into the system. So that means banks. So since I am coming from the HDFC Bank, and prior to that I was part of the Axis Bank, we have seen the guiding principle setting up all the security. What he talks about the GDPR. So we started thinking how we will be able to manage it, right? Every time that is a cyber attack, every time there is controls we need to put, every time we started going to the cloud and all, right? So now the security is extremely key, and the policy is 300 plus kind of controls, mechanism, GDPR, then rest of things we need to implement it. And that's why the challenge is very huge, and we need to be a bit careful, with the different policy coming into the picture. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the insight. Now I'm going beyond banking and financial sector. You see, banking and financial sectors are always been regulated, and they have been instructed to manage data properly, how the data has to be passed. So I guess, especially the large banking and financials who are regulated have followed certain regulations. But now let's talk about e-commerce companies, the startup companies, or automobile industries. Even automobile is, let's say, bigger, small offline companies who is collecting data. Now, because DPDP bills talks about only 3 responsibility. One is a data principal, which is us, which is consumer, and then data fiduciary, which is you guys, and then, of course, the government of India, right? All the responsibility, most of the responsibility has been given to data fiduciary. They have to hire a data protection officer. They have to invest in a lot of infrastructure. Do you think these startup world or small companies who is thriving to grow can spend that much of money? Like, Prabhas, you can talk about.
Yeah, so, there are 2 sides to it. One, from the organization's point of view, when you look at the organizations, like you said, the startups and all, definitely there is not a big appetite to spend so much in terms of, putting the things in place. But there comes the opportunities and also the ecosystem, whether the ecosystem is there or not, and those ecosystem can be, made available at a cheaper cost or not. So that is from the organization's point of view. And but as he said, everybody has started thinking towards it, because the data is the key to all the organizations. And if you really want to scale and succeed, you have to depend on data. And more so in the banking industries, unless and until you build those trust and create protections to the data of the consumers, it will be too difficult for you to be in the market. If you look at the consumer side, one is as per the new, even RBI has also come up saying you have to take the consents from the customers and you have to erase as and when they want all those things. But from the consumer point of view, when you look at, let's say, I have given consents to hundreds of websites and hundreds of the companies. Do I know what are the consents which has been taken off, or I do not have any comprehensive list where I have given the consent to, right? So it while it has to be from the organization's point of view, they have to abide to protect the data and all, but at the same time the government or the ecosystem has to come up saying ki, as a consumer I should also know where exactly I had given the consent and whether those consents are being used, not used, or expired, all those things. So yeah, so it is a challenge from both the sides, but has to be taken up. I mean, this is a high time.
Right. So now there are small companies. I can tell you there are in India lakhs of SMEs who collects data, who wants to grow fast. They do not have a proper IT infrastructure. Forget about security. They can't hire one CISO, not at all. I mean, CISO are very costly, by the way, right? So for them there is a huge risk, right? So do you think DPDP bills has to be actually discussed properly to take care of all these aspects?
No, absolutely. You pointed out a very valid question. So today, if you look at many of these SMEs, they do not use a antivirus in their laptop or the PC. So forget about putting a CISO or to that extent. So it has to be discussed, and when government is coming up with so much of detailed data protection regulations and all, they have to also enable the ecosystem. I'm again coming back to the same thing. Unless and until you create an ecosystem and enable it, it's very difficult for these small organizations to abide those rules and thrive.
Absolutely. So Vikas and Jafar, since you deal with these data fiduciary and they exchange a lot of data with you guys, right? Especially from SMS, WhatsApp. Do you get pressure to manage this InfoSec and entire follow-up? And do you think going forward is going to be more stringent? How you store data, how you retrieve data, how you see data? Because third-party integration is very, very important to sustain the entire ecosystem, right? So I'll ask this question to both people from Axis Mutual Fund as well as HDFC Bank, because you deal with these people. I'm just giving an example. There could be many more. You have more than 2,000 vendors, right? But you have to share data, right? So do you find any issues, because there is a cost of a product which you are servicing, product or services, and there is additional cost which you are going to incur without getting the revenue out of it, right? So how do we balance it, and overall, what do you see?
Oh, it's working. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so as far as the requirements of the clients are concerned, of course, the responsibility of storing the data, securing the data, is on the enterprises. But they do use multiple vendors to transmit the data. So we have requirements from our international aggregators who are doing messaging or CPaaS solutions to other enterprises to securely store the data and to prevent it from security threats, which is, as Mr. Pravash really said, nobody uses an antivirus on their systems. So yes, we're getting concerned about the security and the storage, the encryption of the data, which is really important. Of course, we may be sharing certain personal data, but there is certain sensitive data in the message content or the conversations as well. So what I believe is the startups, it would be an overhead to them. It's really a difficult task to manage what all these regulations worldwide are doing. But there is a dire need of over-the-shelf products, which may be on SaaS-based models or per transaction-based models, like your Consentica. It's really important how you manage that consent, and yeah, people should know what we have opted for and how we can opt out. So that there is an importance that many startup ecosystem especially, they need to have an over-the-shelf product which takes care of these regulations worldwide, and which guarantees them about all these risks involved if there are data leaks, and especially on taking the consent side as well. So yeah, I mean, I believe that the approach we have taken is integration with such third-party providers, so that we can give an embedded solution, a turnkey solution to the enterprises to manage from the consent to the termination of such messages, or even storing those messages. So yeah.
From your side, how do you manage the third-party vendors? What are the assessment and how exactly the process? Of course, the process gets evolved with time, but from a DPDP perspective, the new regulation perspective, are you still putting the same, or a lot of change has happened or is happening?
Yeah, I can say there are a lot of changes that has happened. It is not a normal engagement right now. It's like we are bound from the regulatory side to make sure our vendors are at the same par at what we have. So the agreements are also, the clauses are also being changed accordingly. People are also demanding around how much cyber insurance you have from the third party. So because if anything happens, you should be able to. So whether you have the same capability or at the same time, we also, before onboarding any vendor, so people have a thorough checklist. Like it's like entire audit happens before you onboard any vendor. And then too, as he rightly said, hardly anything is allowed to store. Now the vendors are allowed to just process the things. Aggregators are there. So this is how the controls are established. The assessments are done, regular audits are done. Even I can say RBI or all regulatory firms have issued guidelines for third-party assessment, outsourcing guidelines, which are clearly demarking like what is being required. So, but
How do you, these kind of things can be done with a large organization who is your third-party vendor, but they are large. Now, let's say a lot of innovations happening on AI, ML, blockchain, so these are very small companies. They don't have the bootstraps, right? But they would like to work with a large organization, and they have a good product. If you go through the entire chain, I mean, they will bleed, right? They may not be able to do it. So we have to find a balance between these two. I understand from regulatory perspective, I'm completely with you that regulators are regulators. What we also deal with TRI and so. But at the same time, there has to be a way out, to incorporate these guys also with new innovations. I mean, that's open to all.
So I have view bit different. So I have seen, I mean, somewhere we are being heavily regulated, but fintech company, they are not, right? But on the same time, they do the innovations very fast, yeah? You let, 2004 ATM started, right? But today, all the disbursement, everything, people started getting into the blockchain. Some people started metaverse and all, right? So the currency dispositions and all are getting, enhancing largely. And these are the fintech behind the scene, behind the mind. These are the people who are doing it. So almost most of the banks, if you look at the JPMC or any investment bank globally, they are all tied up for doing a lot of investment work in fintech, be it in their lab or be it outside lab. Now, if you look at the, the vendor onboarding, the processing, what you talked, right? So there is a natural, all these people or the matured player, they have a proper checklist and all. But it's very tough to, manage also the, third-party vendor and all. Many times they click the, your data point and they take it, right? I have seen it happens, in the last quarter where, people, during OTP, they capture the OTP and they use that OTP, okay, add into the beneficiary through the mobile channel and, hack the systems. So those are things happens, right? So you cannot control how to, not to click on people works from home, right? The vendors, people and all. So those scenarios are there. I'm not sure whether we have fully 100% cracked, how to take care of it. But there is always a fintech roles in any innovation place. If you look at the neo banking, right? Nobody is going to the banks, right? It is a digital banking. If you talk about the RICS and, RICS, AML and AI stuffs and all, so a lot of fintech, companies, they build those areas which enables the, AI-driven and you also spoke the, blockchain kind of, content management. So those are things, technology we should adopt quickly and, get rid of, how far we should, manage our content. Because a lot of content management, if you look at, for the general purpose, later today, somebody is processing to the, any website, right? So that bank or any company captures your every click, whether you are interested in personal loan or home loan or car loan, it captures through the browser what you are trying to do it, right? Whether you have given consent or not given consent, but they will try to, bank or company will try to reach you. Okay, he has a traveled XYZ because that is the feature under the browser cookies they developed, right? Sometimes if also customer tell that no, you just put not consent to the anything, so bank won't come. But those are the key areas which we should aggressively focus. Otherwise, fine is very high. RBI regulatory they will sue our staffs and we will lose our job also sometimes. So.
Okay, Pravash, yeah, you would like to add.
Yeah, just to add this, after this digital lending guidelines, so many things have changed. Many fintechs who were not taking care of all those things are now either doing it or they are out of business. Many of these NBFCs and all, I mean, who were not abiding to those, whether it is RBI guidelines and all, so they were, their license has been cancelled. So the repercussion has been really bad. And that's the reason everybody is now, gearing towards implementing those, and most of these guys have now implemented also. So whether it is sharing of the data, storing of the data, to what extent they can store, to what extent they can, take those data from the banks and NBFCs are pretty much defined, and also, the fintechs who really want to use those data to create, whether it is AI or any data model which requires a lot of data points, they want it and you can supply to that, but there has to be some methodology where you can purge those data and destroy it after some time. That has to be done, otherwise,
PPDP talks about this, how long you can store the data and what purpose, and everything has to be very transparent, right? Now, coming back to the perception. In India, unless and until there is a law, there is a regulation, we actually don't do or comply with what it should be legally or socially, right? But my another question here is that don't you think as an organization, we should use this as a building trust rather than only following regulation? Because if customer will have a trust on you, they will do business for long term. And what trust is in these days is not about only product and services, which you commit and you provide, but apart from that, it is the data which is safe with you or not. Because data is all kind. There could be a personal data, sensitive data. Sensitive data is very, very important, right? So forget about regulation. Don't you think as an enterprise, we should try to implement as a building trust rather than regulation?
Yeah, and also it links to your first question. So, how the small company or the, startups will be able to do that. See, the day you build that DNA, whenever the data comes to your system has to be protected, whether at the, feet on street level or coming from the, digital sources like websites, mobile applications and all. If you ensure that it is getting protected at the point of entry, probably you will create those DNA and you will spend less in terms of putting those IT infrastructure in place to protect those data. But this has to be the DNA, me coming from the financial industry, I know how difficult it is when the trust is breached. You can't sell a single product, right? And every financial product is primarily dependent on trust. So it's very, very important to have those, as a DNA of your organizations rather than waiting for the, regulations to stop you to.
But generally we see that, we should, but we don't, right?
I agree. So, that also comes at what cost, and
Absolutely, yeah.
And also it was, few years back, nobody was looking at it. Everybody was looking at, how to grow your books or grow your customer base without putting those in place. And people have not seen the ramification of the misuse of those data. Today, everybody is aware about it, and more from the government or from the organizations, it's the public who is asking, where are you storing my data? How secure your servers are? So those are the questions are being asked now. So that's what I'm saying. So it has become a high time round.
Right.
Yeah, Prabhat, I just want to add, you asked a question that how come startups, cope up with the new regulation or new cost? So I think the way I would look is that cost of compliance versus cost of non-compliance. If you were to put the picture in that perspective, I think then startups will understand that cost of compliance is far lesser than cost of non-compliance. And that's how they can start their journey in building up the trust, which eventually helps them in selling the right product and right value. This is the way I would look at it, because I have spent some time in real estate industry also, and I've seen that post-RERA implementation, how things have changed, not only for consumers, for builders as well. So obviously, cost of compliance versus non-compliance. And in any case, startup, when they start, they have to go and file their company papers. They have to go and get all those GST numbers, directors' numbers. So if they're doing so many other activities, why not look at this?
Yeah, but I mean, just to counter this argument, because I have started two startups, so I know what problem we face. You see, there are compliances like ISO 227001 have to comply. One is a certification. Other is the process has to be followed year on year. SOC 2 compliances, this is I've heard 3 years back. You need to do that. I guess one of the compliance, right? I mean, and there's a cost to it. It is not only on paper. It has to be complied, right? So there is a huge cost apart from doing business. So I'm not saying you should not comply. There has to be a balance. That is what I meant to say. But there is a huge cost. That's what I was saying.
There's a sweet spot. I mean, always between compliance and non-compliance, it's not 0 and 1. There is a sweet spot where you can meet the compliance as well as gain the customer trust. I think importantly for a startup is to get the customer in at a value which you can drive out of this. And this is how you drive out of it.
Right. So one of the, how much time we have, James? Oh, you're out. Okay. So this discussion will keep on going. Yeah. 1 minute over time, right? So I'll sum it up. So this discussion will keep on and we can improvising and evolve as the data protection bill is going to come in India. Before that, TCCPR, which has come in 2018, is still not getting implemented properly. Last discussion we have seen, still it is not secured, messaging is not trusted. People find always way to, to find a way to, distrust the platform, right? But we'll keep discussing this as we go on. Thank you very much, panelists.